There are questions that seem simple but touch the deepest corners of the soul. On a quiet evening, in a crowded auditorium filled with hundreds of people, an 8-year-old girl named Lily asked an innocent yet haunting question: "What does God mean to you?" A question no one expected would make Donald Trump, a man known for his strength and determination, pause. In that rare moment of silence, no one knew what would happen next. How would he respond? A passing joke, a sharp rhetorical answer, or something else? Something genuine that would touch the hearts of everyone present. The auditorium was packed that evening. Bright stage lights illuminated every corner, reflecting off elegant suits and glamorous evening gowns. People had gathered to hear Donald Trump, one of the most famous and controversial figures of our time, deliver a speech. The atmosphere buzzed with anticipation. Applause rippled through the room as he approached the podium, then hushed when he began to speak. Every word he uttered was powerful, confident, and filled with the energy of a seasoned leader. Donald Trump was well known for his resilience, sometimes bordering on arrogance. He never hesitated to speak his mind, even if it ruffled feathers. To many, he symbolized power and decisiveness. To others, he was the center of endless debate. But love him or hate him, no one could deny the magnetic pull of his presence. And tonight, the audience expected another impactful speech, a bold message like the hundreds he had delivered before. But the most unexpected thing happened. In the midst of his passionate talk about achievements, success, and power, a small voice suddenly echoed from the audience. It was the voice of a young girl, no more than 8 years old, with wide, innocent eyes. "What does God mean to you?" she asked, a simple question that left the entire auditorium frozen. No one spoke. No one moved. Silence filled the room as every eye turned to the man standing on stage. This wasn't the kind of question people usually asked Donald Trump. They typically asked about business, politics, money, and power, the things he was most famous for. But behind that strong exterior, was there a part of him that ever pondered the meaning of faith, of deeper spiritual values? People waited for the usual response: bold, decisive, perhaps a joke or a sharp remark to ease the tension. But strangely, Donald Trump didn't answer right away. He paused, a flicker of thought crossing his eyes. In that moment, people saw a different Donald Trump, quiet and reflective, as if he himself was searching for the answer. Only a few seconds passed, but in that heavy silence, it felt like an eternity. The people in that room felt something different. They were no longer just an audience. They had become witnesses to a rare moment. A moment when a powerful figure suddenly appeared more human than ever. Perhaps even Donald Trump himself hadn't expected that a question from a young girl could leave him so stunned. What lies behind the image of a strong man? Behind the decisiveness, the success, and the wealth? What truly remains? They say true strength isn't about having all the answers, but about facing the hardest questions, the ones that touch the soul. That young girl, with her innocence and sincerity, had asked a question not just for Donald Trump, but for everyone in the room. What does God mean in our lives? Perhaps in that brief moment, Donald Trump realized that no amount of power or success could answer everything. And in facing a simple question from a young girl, he was given a chance to look inward, to the place where true values might have been forgotten amidst the glittering facade of life. As everyone waited for his response, no one knew what he would say next. But one thing was certain. That moment of silence left an indelible impression on everyone present. It was a moment they would remember not because of what he said, but because a small question had touched the deepest part of the soul. In the hush of an emotionally charged atmosphere, Lily stood there, small but unwavering. The worn Bible in her hand seemed like a sacred symbol of faith and family love. As her question echoed through the room, silence enveloped the space. Not the kind of emptiness that feels hollow, but one filled with anticipation and deep emotion. Donald Trump, a man known for his confident demeanor and decisive words, now stood still, as though confronting a profound memory buried deep within him. "Mr. Trump, what does God mean to you?" Her question wasn't just a child's innocent curiosity, it was a whisper of the soul, a question many adults have avoided throughout their lives. Trump looked at Lily and his gaze softened, gentler than usual. Perhaps in her eyes he saw a reflection of his younger self, back when faith was something both familiar and distant. "That's a big question," Trump began, his voice lowered, steady but no longer rehearsed. It was the sound of honesty, a soul opening up before a room full of strangers. "And it's not one I've always had the answer to." That admission sent a ripple through the room. A man known for his strength and confidence was now standing before an 8-year-old girl, confessing his imperfections. It was a rare moment, a profoundly moving shift. Trump went on to share memories of his childhood, of sitting in church pews, gazing up at the stained glass windows depicting saints, wondering if God was really listening. The memory was vivid, as if it had happened just yesterday. And when he spoke of his father, who once told him that faith is like a ladder you have to climb one step at a time, his voice grew warmer and more emotional. "Sometimes you're afraid you'll fall, but you keep climbing because there's something up there worth reaching for." Those words were more than just a father's lesson to his son. They were now a message to everyone in that room, each one hanging on to his every word. Lily stood quietly, her small hands no longer trembling. She watched the man before her, not with the awe reserved for a powerful figure, but with the understanding of a young soul slowly grasping the meaning behind his words. When Trump admitted that he had once been angry with God, that he had felt lonely and doubted his existence, many in the room nodded. Those feelings weren't just Trump's, they were universal emotions of anyone who had ever experienced loss and pain. But what made this moment extraordinary was the way Trump described the change in his heart. "Even in my worst moments, when I thought I was alone, I realized that faith wasn't about always having the answers. It's about believing that even when you don't see the whole picture, there's a purpose." His words didn't sound like a speech. They felt like a confession, a comforting message to himself and everyone listening. Lily bowed her head, tears quietly streaming down her cheeks. Not tears of sadness, but of emotion. The feeling of finally finding a piece of the answer she had been searching for. She wasn't crying because of Trump's words, but because of the meaning behind them, the sense of empathy she found there. The silence in the room gradually gave way to gentle murmurs. People turned to each other, quietly sharing the emotions they were feeling. None of them had come to hear a story about faith or loss, yet somehow, that was exactly what they needed at that moment. Trump looked at Lily, his eyes kinder than ever. "And God, to me, is that purpose. He's the reminder that even when we fall, even when we fail, we're not done. He's the one who keeps telling us to climb the ladder, even when it feels like it's going to break." His words weren't loud or grandiose, but they touched the hearts of everyone present, because deep down, perhaps everyone carried a ladder they were still climbing, despite the weariness, despite the temptation to let go. As Trump finished speaking, the room seemed to exhale, not out of relief that it was over, but out of a shared sense of understanding, of being seen and touched in the deepest corners of the soul. Lily nodded, her tear-filled eyes shining with newfound determination. She didn't say anything, but the way she stood a little straighter and held her Bible a little tighter said it all. This was no longer just Donald Trump's or Lily's story. It had become the story of everyone who had ever wrestled with faith, who had ever searched for answers in life's hardest moments. And in that brief moment, As strangers shared empathy and hope, it felt like they had found something far greater than they ever expected. When all light seemed to dim, Donald Trump stood up and delivered a powerful message about faith and hope. To him, faith is not about always having all the answers. It is about the courage to keep climbing the ladder of life, even when the fear of falling constantly looms. His words were not just comforting, they were a beacon of light for those navigating the roughest roads of adversity. Trump emphasized that hope is not something that exists only in favorable conditions. It is the flicker of light that shines brightest in the darkest moments. When everything around us seems to be against us, that is when hope must be held into the most. Throughout the years of facing criticism, failure, and relentless challenges, he learned to cherish every moment he rose after a fall. For him, failure was never the end. It was a valuable lesson for a new beginning. The stories he shared about being heavily criticized in politics, controversial decisions, and the storms he weathered in life became living proof of the power of perseverance. Many times he faced doubt, even from those who once supported him. But instead of giving up, he chose to stand tall, holding on to the belief that a brighter tomorrow was still ahead. Trump spoke of faith not as an abstract concept, but as a part of everyday life. He recounted moments when he had to make tough decisions, times when he felt lost, but it was his trust in his goals and personal values that helped him pull through. Sometimes you don't need to see the whole staircase. You just need to see the next step to keep moving forward, he said with a gentle smile. Moreover, Trump shared that hope is a power that can spread to others. Every time he stood back up after a fall, every time he kept going when people thought he would stop, he not only inspired himself but also millions who were watching him. His belief in a better future became a source of motivation for many, especially those feeling stuck in life. Trump's persistence hasn't always been seen in a positive light. At times, he was criticized for being stubborn or inflexible, but to him, that was the price of standing firm in his beliefs and values. In a rapidly changing world where nothing seems to stay constant, holding on to one's faith is no easy feat. Yet Trump proved that as long as we refuse to give up, anything is possible. His faith was not just rooted in personal strength, but also drawn from the people around him. He mentioned his family, those who stood by him even in the hardest of times. Their love and unwavering support fueled his strength, helping him keep moving forward on his challenging journey. Concluding his message on faith and hope, Trump reminded everyone that adversity is an inevitable part of life, but it is precisely in those difficult times that we truly discover our inner strength. Keep walking, even if it's slow, even if you're tired, because at the end of the road, light is always waiting for those who never give up, he said, with a gaze filled with unwavering belief. Trump's message was not just words. It was a call to action. It was a reminder that no matter how hard life gets, as long as we hold on to faith and hope, we will find our way. After Trump shared his thoughts on faith and hope, a new atmosphere emerged in the hall, one filled with connection and empathy. Lily's question, seemingly simple yet carrying deep emotions, had touched the hearts of everyone present. The gazes directed toward the little girl were no longer merely curious. They now carried understanding and shared sentiment. Stories began to arise from all corners of the room. A middle-aged woman stood up, her voice trembling as she spoke of her late husband. She recounted the dark days when the pain of loss seemed to drown her in despair. But it was her faith in a better tomorrow, in a reunion in another world, that helped her carry on. "I'm not strong every day," she admitted, "but every time I fall, I remind myself that I'm not alone." A young man with dark circles under his eyes, the mark of many sleepless nights, also spoke up. He shared his struggle with depression, a time when everything around him seemed engulfed in gray. "I once wanted to give it all up," he confessed, "but then I realized that sometimes Just one hand reaching out is enough to keep going." His heartfelt words left the room in silence. The gentle touch of hands placed on his shoulders by those nearby served as quiet but profound encouragement. In a corner of the room, an elderly man slowly rose to his feet. His deep, warm voice carried the weight of life's experiences. He spoke of the war, of losses too great to mend. "I saw my friends fall right before my eyes. At the time, I thought my heart could never heal again. But over the years, I learned that no matter how painful it is, love and empathy always endure, like small candles that never go out." The hall seemed to transform into a sanctuary where people could finally unburden their hearts. The tears that fell were no longer just expressions of sadness. They were a release, a way to reclaim inner peace. In that moment, they were no longer strangers. They were kindred souls, sharing and healing together. Lily sat quietly, listening to each story with bright, glistening eyes. She said nothing more, but the gentle smile on her lips spoke volumes. Sometimes simply knowing that you are not alone in your pain is a powerful comfort. And in that hall, the connection and empathy that blossomed became a light, illuminating the path ahead for everyone present. After the heartfelt sharing about faith and hope, the atmosphere in the hall fell silent for a moment. Yet within that stillness, Lily's gentle question unexpectedly opened a space of profound connection. A hesitant hand rose from the back of the room. It belonged to a middle-aged man with sorrowful eyes. His voice trembled as he shared the pain of losing a loved one in a sudden accident, a wound he once thought would never heal. Tears quietly traced down his cheeks, but he did not feel alone. For soon after, others began to share their own stories. A young woman sitting near the front spoke of her battle with a life-threatening illness. She once believed she would never overcome it, but something deep within her, a fragile glimmer of hope, kept her holding on. She shared that in her darkest moments, just seeing her little daughter smile gave her the strength to keep fighting. The wave of empathy continued to spread. An elderly woman with a petite frame but kind, wise eyes stood up and spoke about her tumultuous youth. She had once lost everything in the war, but it was faith and the love of those around her that helped her rise again and rediscover the meaning of life. Her voice quivered but remained warm, delivering a powerful message of resilience. Trump, who had been quietly listening with a thoughtful expression, gently walked to the center of the room. He said that genuine connection is one of the most extraordinary gifts people can offer one another. "We may not always be able to heal someone else's pain," he said, "but we can listen, empathize, and let them know they are not alone." Those words seemed to touch the hearts of everyone in the room. They were no longer strangers, but souls walking together on a shared journey, a journey in search of comfort and hope. This connection was not just about the stories being told. It was an invisible thread binding everyone with love and understanding. It was the power of empathy, a force strong enough to transcend even the deepest of sorrows. The story came to an end, but the echoes of faith, hope, and connection lingered in the hearts of everyone present. From pain that once seemed insurmountable, people learned to find light through empathy and sharing. The deepest lesson was the power of faith, not always providing answers, but always serving as a guiding lighthouse through life's storms. By continuing to move forward, we realize that it is often through our greatest trials that our hearts find healing and growth.